All right, another stream of consciousness. For decades, our family has had an affinity with New York City. While I was working in the brokerage field, I trained in the World Trade Center for over a month. I was in that 67th or 68th floor every day for over a month learning the brokerage trade. Due to my affinity to the city, my wife and I took our daughters to the city often. This was when I was gainfully employed as a stockbroker on Easter and Christmas and different things. We loved it. All of my daughters have lived in the city at some point in time in their life. My oldest daughter attended school there and studied music. Middle daughter, filmmaker, writer. She lived in New York twice now. And our youngest has just finished a summer program in architecture there. And last week after the show, that night, Mary and I flew to support the graduation from the summer program and spent 4 days. I told Derek earlier, it's the first 4 days I have done nothing but observe people. I did not write a word. I didn't read a word. I didn't even read the word, Bible. I did nothing but observe what was around me. And probably tens of thousands of people, maybe more. What did I learn? First, I learned that ideology and dogma becomes really insignificant amidst a culture like that. And under the weight of a place like New York City, if you're willing to let your prejudices fall, they can fall. I stepped out in the early morning sidewalk full of opinions about what God and Jesus are about to do in this life and world, and I exited that same sidewalk at dusk with a worldview that shrunk my pet opinions down considerably, humbly. A much bigger place God has created for this world, not smaller, bigger. It's really, really easy to stay kind of hoveled up in your own world, your own microcosm, your own thinking of what you believe and what you see. And it's really easy to get trapped in that. And all you got to do is go rub shoulders on the street with thousands of smelly, different type of every walk people and look out for their children who are running out toward the street. And the religious delusions start to crumble, again, if you let them. Does God truly love us all? He does. So much He sent His only begotten Son to save us. Do all really and actually have a chance to know Him the way we say they have to know Him before they die? Go walk the streets of New York City before you answer that. Observe the people who are wearing burqas and face coverings and yarmulkes and peace malas and tichels and temple garments in 90-degree heat and tell me that they are all errant, going to hell forever because they were born in that faith and they were taught to ardently seek God through that means, and they are living it right before your eyes. So I am not a universalist at all. To me, they are all groping for Jesus. They just don't all know it yet. And they will know it. Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. But He is the only way. But go to New York City if you think you have all the answers in your myopic studies of the morning and you're walking about with your crosses tattooed on your hands and things. So another thing I learned has to do with one of my favorite topics when it comes to talking about religion, and that's culture. In small town USA, if it's an agricultural town, the culture kind of drowns everything that's there. So your food is Western if it's an agrarian, agrestic state. If cowboy boots and cowboy hats and cowboy shirts, that kind of dominates the small town culture. And if you don't conform to that, you typically are cast out. And typically people who don't conform to small town culture get cast out to places like New York City, because there's nowhere else for them to go. Larger towns tend to have more subcultures because they're larger. So for instance, in Huntington Beach or Salt Lake City, there's a lot of subcultures that are allowed to thrive and exist, but they too are limited to a lot of the factors that are external. So like Huntington Beach has a surf culture, it has a skate culture, it has a drug culture that kind of gets involved to all of that. It has a beach culture that has a lot of subcultures all of its own: surfers, skimboarders, boogie boarders, longboarders, body surfers, swimmers, all that. And then there's a hot rod culture, a music culture, a sports culture. And then in Huntington, there's a general I'm tattooed, MMA fighter, porn star girlfriend culture. That all exists in Huntington, and all those little subcultures thriving. All right? If you don't fit in, even in a large city like that, you got to go somewhere else. For any number of reasons, New York City has transcended establishing a general culture, or even an amalgamation of subcultures. They cannot be defined in that place. I discovered that watching. There are so many cultures in that city that no one will ever have the chance to dominate another one. You could say, well, the Orthodox Jews, they would love to. They're not gonna. You could say the unorthodox Jews. You could say the Muslims. You could say the Indians. You could say the blacks. You could say the Chinese. You could say the Italians. They all have some little part of the city that they kind of have taken over and owned. But at large, everybody has to walk down from 125th all the way down to Fifth Avenue. Everybody has to walk on the same sidewalks, and every culture is represented. I mean, homeless women, healthy women, well-dressed women, toothless women, singing people, begging people, people without limbs, all colors, angry people, theatrical people. So there are people from every country on earth that are coming into that place. They're sharing the same sidewalk. There's locals from every country on earth. There are people wearing clothes from every country on earth, eating foods from every country on earth. There are mosques, there are temples, there are churches, there are synagogues next to drugstores and drugs on the street and bodegas and wax museums. It's an amalgamation of culture, but not one of them dominates. So while I'm sure the Mormons and the Orthodox Jews or the Muslims or the evangelicals would love to get that city to fit under its stamp or culture, it won't ever happen. They can't. That's the beautiful thing about that city, is they cannot dominate. Why? It's a fantastic scene of people that were all created by God. We forget that when we get myopic in our views and our faiths. We forget that He created them, and they are getting along rather remarkably in very close, stacked upon stacked culture. The people are forced to accept and deal with all of these types, and their own personal beliefs, they have little to do with engagement. They just accept this as the fact. Nobody seems to care. And to me, it's a perfect picture of what Christianity could be if men would strip away trying to control it. I believe New York City is a perfect picture of what Christianity could be. What's truly amazing about the number and variety of cultures thriving in the city is their presence of all those cultures prevents a single dominant culture from coming in and dominating them. It's not homogeny that keeps it strong, it's diversity that keeps it strong. Okay? So there's two ways that you can approach that subject. You can take a society or a group or a movement and you can say we need to be homogenous so that we can have power. The Third Reich, Jonestown, Mormonism, in early Mormonism in Utah, homogenous. Still homogenous. White shirt, tie, same haircuts, look, homogenous. The McDonald's Corporation, we will do this all the same way to maintain order and control. Or New York shows us that diversity, and I know that's such an old trite word today, but it's the diversity of people and cultures who God has made diverse that keeps from one certain group coming and taking over. Did you ever think about that? That you don't need to run a religion and you don't need to run a government with homogenous leanings, that you can have one actually thrive with people being free to be cowboys or gays or amputees or whatever, and yet all have a common goal of Christ. That is a great picture. God has made humankind so diverse. There is not a same two people on the face of this earth. Fingerprints, I'm not even sure if identical twins. Eyes, when they do eye scans, there's not two people the same on this entire earth ever. God has done that. We are different in our height, our weight, our body shape. We are different in our genders. We are different, and God has done that. Men take what God has done and said, get over here in this camp and be the same because we want to control. You see the difference and why I'm fighting for this when we talk about it? I think Christianity can learn a lot from New York City. That's part of my stream of consciousness tonight. And with that, I am going to go over to our board of direction.